Right, hi guys. Today we are going to be talking about The Empty Throne by Bernard Cornwell, which is the 8th novel in his Last Kingdom series of Anglo-Saxon historical novels. Now, before I even get into any kind of synopsis on this, I want to put a big spoiler warning here. There's going to be huge spoilers all the way through this review, so if you are planning to read this, then I highly recommend that you do so before you watch the video. There is one thing that happens really early on in this book that I thought was really affecting the first time that I read it, and I really wouldn't want to spoil that for anyone, so you have been warned. So anyway, with that said, here goes. At the end of The Pagan Lord, which is the previous book in this series, our main protagonist Uhtred and his cousin Ethelred, who is the de facto ruler of the Kingdom of Mercia, were both wounded in battle. Now, Uhtred's wound is still festering and it has left him severely weakened, and Ethelred is basically dying of his wound. And his death will leave the throne of Mercia empty, hence the title of the book. And much of this novel tells of the political manoeuvrings of various claimants to this throne, of which there are many, including Ardwulf, who is the captain of Ethelred's household guard. You've got Edward, who is the king of the powerful neighbouring kingdom of Wessex. You've got Ethelfled, who is Ethelred's wife and Uhtred's lover, and also Edward's sister. And of course there is our very own Uhtred, who is Ethelred's cousin, so his closest surviving male kin. And in addition to this plot line, we also follow Uhtred's personal quest to find the Sword of Canute, which is the weapon that inflicted the wound that is still plaguing him, because he is convinced that there is some kind of Christian sorcery at play that is preventing his healing. So, is it any good? Well, yeah, as always, Bernard Cornwell has delivered an adrenaline-fueled adventure through a really intriguing period of history, so this is highly recommended stuff. Right, so yeah, first of all, I'm going to talk about the big spoiler that I mentioned before, which I have actually already spoiled, by the way. So I hope you listened to my warning about that. So the prologue of this book is the first time in this entire series, which we are, as I said, 8 books into, that we get from a point of view other than Uhtred's. I mean, admittedly, it is his son who's also called Uhtred, but that's kind of by the by. Now, given that Uhtred was badly wounded right at the end of the last book, the first time I read this, I remember being completely thrown by this, but, you know, in a really good way. And it is a fantastic bit of trickery from Bernard Cornwell here, worthy of Uhtred himself. And I was like, you know, what? Uhtred's dead? Is the whole rest of the book, is the whole rest of the series going to be from his son's point of view? Like, what is going on here? Now, of course, Uhtred re-enters the narrative at the end of the prologue, and the rest of the book is from his point of view. But by that point, I was already completely hooked. And from then on, we are straight back into the sort of action-packed, thoroughly researched, well-written fare that Cornwell always manages to serve up. Now, Uhtred's initial physical weakness due to the injury that he suffered means that he has to rely more heavily on his cunning, which of course he has in plenty, and it's always good to see how he beats his enemies against the odds by using his wits rather than his sword arm. He also displays just how much he's learned about politicking throughout the series, and it's a sharp contrast to his ability in this area compared to the earlier books. Cornwell also shows like a load of humour in his writing, and this book has some particularly funny sections, especially with the range of insults and threats that Uhtred comes out with, backed up by his right-hand man Finan, who I am a massive fan of as a character. Honestly, I would love to see a spin-off novel about his life. That would be a great read. There are some other great secondary characters too. Uhtred's son, as I've said, who's also called Uhtred, and his daughter Stiora, and his ward Athelstan, who is a potential heir to the throne of Wessex. They all undergo some character growth in this book that is handled really nicely. And you've got Ethelfled, who has become just as much of a battle leader as Uhtred himself, and also a very able politician. You know, I can't mention all of them. The video would just be too long. Now, what I will say is that all the books in the Last Kingdom series can be read as standalone novels to an extent, but with this one especially, I think it's really beneficial to have read the previous books in the series, because there's a lot of references to previous events, characters that have appeared throughout the series, which are briefly explained. If you understand them in the context of Uhtred's character, then they really highlight how he's changed and learned and developed over the course of this series in some ways and not necessarily in other ways. And I think that knowledge for the reader adds a whole nother level of enjoyment to it. So yeah, anyway, that'll do. Just a quick review, because you know, I've already reviewed the other 7 books in the series. But yeah, that was The Empty Throne by Bernard Cornwell, 8th book in the Last Kingdom series, and this is a really good instalment in that series. I would highly recommend that you read the whole thing. But yeah, this one is particularly good. So yeah, anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know if you've read it, and goodbye. I'll see you next time.